on the Ruslan Belov channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine as of May 14, 2025. A huge number of events have taken place today, so let's get started. We'll begin with the South Donetsk direction, specifically the area west of Velika Novosilka, where the armed forces of the Russian Federation, albeit at a slow pace, continue advancing westward with the aim of encircling and flanking the settlements of Novopil and Zeleny Pole. At least, this is indicated by data from various mapping services. Today, the continued advance toward Zeleny Pole and Novopil was confirmed by both neutral and pro-Ukrainian cartographic sources. Overall, movement in this area is quite difficult. There are small villages, open skies, a massive amount of dragon's teeth, barbed wire, and a large number of strongpoints, between which Russian units are constantly maneuvering. Next, we move to the Bohhatier section of the front. There has been a shift in the line here. This is how the map looks today, by the end of May 14th. But just yesterday, the map looked like this. As we can see, according to various mappers, over the past day, the Russian army managed to take control of at least 60%, possibly more, of the settlement of Bohhatier. Moreover, it's worth noting that during the latest offensive, Russian forces captured the northeasternmost part of Bohhatier. This allowed them to cut off a small road that just a few days ago connected Bohhatier to the settlement of Alexeyevka. The Ukrainian side had been using this road for evacuation and ammunition supply. At present, that is no longer possible. According to incoming reports, Ukrainian forces have entrenched themselves in the northwestern part of the settlement, awaiting an order to retreat. But even if such an order is given, the Ukrainian army will face many problems. Previously, they had the option to retreat toward Alexeyevka, but now that route is no longer viable. Most likely, during the upcoming night between May 14th and 15th, the remaining Ukrainian units will begin gradually moving across the fields westward toward the village of Otradne, and possibly even further toward Zaporizhzhia and Komar. And here several problems arise. First, the areas between Bohhatier and Otradne, as seen on the map, are absolutely covered with barbed wire. There are only a few narrow corridors known to both sides through which Ukrainian troops could potentially escape. However, it's highly likely that this area is already swarming with hundreds of Russian drones hovering in the sky, waiting for the moment Ukrainian units begin their withdrawal. As a result, the Ukrainian armed forces are expected to suffer heavy losses during their retreat from Bohhatier. At the moment, Russian artillery and drones continue to strike the northwestern outskirts of the settlement, trying to force out the remaining Ukrainian units and crush the last will to resist in this sector of the front. At the same time, some pro-Ukrainian cartographic analysts are publishing numerous reports confirming that the battle for Bohhatier is nearing its conclusion and that the settlement will likely be abandoned soon. Apparently, the next heavily contested stronghold will be the settlement of Alexeyevka. But even there, we can observe changes along the front line. According to various mapping sources, over the past day, Russian forces have entered the eastern part of the settlement and expanded their zone of control. There are also reports that Russian troops are continuing their advance north of Alexeyevka, attempting to flank it and reach its northwestern and western outskirts. Of course, this will not be easy. As we can see, the fields are riddled with numerous anti-tank trenches and multiple rows of barbed wire. Between Malynivka and Alexeyevka, there are at least two forest belts stretching for dozens of kilometers, all lined with barbed wire. Progress here will be very difficult and, of course, it will take time for Russian units to secure the area enough to enable further movement toward the western and northwestern outskirts. Slightly to the north, Russian units have come to a complete halt in front of Novopavlivka. There is a gradual expansion of control underway. Today, the reason for this became clear. This is the actual regional boundary between Dnipropetrovsk Oblast and the Donetsk region. As we can see, along the entire line, from the settlement of Muravka all the way to Novokranka, there are at least several anti-tank ditches dug, along with multiple layers of dragon's teeth defenses. In other words, advancing further west is an extremely difficult task, and it seems unlikely that we should expect any major offensive action in the western direction from the direction of Kurakhove. Apparently, the Russian army's advance toward Novopavlivka will continue only through small villages along the regional border. northward between Novoserhivka and Novonikolaevka, and seemingly from Alexeyevka northwestward toward Dakhne and possibly further toward Filia, along a fortified network of strongpoints marked in bright yellow on the map. Next, we move to the Pokrovsk section of the front, where fighting continues on both the southwestern and southeastern outskirts. The armed forces of the Russian Federation are gradually applying pressure and wearing down the Ukrainian defenses. There are also some interesting visuals coming from Pokrovsk itself. We can see Ukrainian soldiers in the southern citadel area moving among almost completely destroyed buildings. At this time, the Russian army is not actively assaulting this section of the front, as the high-rise urban combat conditions are very difficult. However, it appears increasingly likely that Russia may not need to launch a direct assault on Pokrovsk. This is because more and more reports are coming from the southeastern flank, where Russian forces over the past several days have significantly improved their positions. It appears that the front on the southeastern edge of Pokrovsk has effectively collapsed. Let's break down what's been happening in this area. Today, as you can see, the map has been updated again. Now let's rewind a bit and look at how the situation has evolved over the past few days. According to various sources and the Russian Ministry of Defense, Russian forces made significant advances starting around May 9th to 10th, 2025. During this period, offensives began towards settlements such as Mirolyubivka, slightly north of Hrodivka, and also toward the village of Malynivka. By May 12, 2025, Russian units had taken full control of the reservoir and the Zhuravka River, as well as the Toretsk River. This was the first major indicator that something serious was unfolding in the area. By May 13, 2025, the Russian Ministry of Defense reported that the Russian army had fully cleared Mirolyubivka, a critical settlement that played a key logistical role and was vital to the defense of the entire eastern flank of the Pokrovsk agglomeration. And today, on May 14th, the map has been significantly updated across the entire sector. The settlement of Mikhailivka has also been added to the controlled territory. According to sources, including the Russian Ministry of Defense, Russian forces took control of Mikhailivka immediately after Mirolyubivka. There are also reports from various mappers that another strongpoint, located on the Ukrainian side of the Zhuravka River, just north of Hrodivka, has also come under Russian control. But the most important footage today comes from Malynivka. In fact, to be more precise, it was published yesterday evening on May 13, 2025. Certain Russian sources released footage showing Malynivka, including at least 3 locations in the village where Russian soldiers had managed to raise Russian flags. Based on this footage, some mapping services began updating their maps yesterday evening and this morning, coloring in roughly 70% of Malynivka as under the control of Russian forces. This information was later confirmed by other sources, including neutral cartographers, and most importantly, by pro-Ukrainian mapping services. We'll examine their updates in more detail later. Additionally, during the day, another video surfaced, this time from the western outskirts of Malynivka. In it, we can see drone strikes hitting Russian columns, Russian equipment, and positions of the Russian army in the western part of the village. The burning building shown in the footage was geolocated at that exact spot, confirming that Russian assault units had reached this area. This is a major and significant advance, with a large number of strongpoints falling into Russian hands. It appears that over the coming day or two, the Russian army will focus its efforts on the network of strongpoints situated between Yelizavetivka, Mirolyubivka, and Malynivka. These are the trenches and fortifications located in this pocket. Of course, clearing this area will take some time, not only because of the strongpoints, but also because of the Dragon's Teeth and anti-tank ditches. If the Russian army had attempted to storm these positions directly from the southeast, they would have achieved nothing. That's why we can see that a flanking maneuver was conducted, and now this network of positions has been fully encircled, with their supply lines cut off. It seems highly likely that during the night of May 14th to 15th, Ukrainian forces will abandon this network of strongholds. Otherwise, they risk encirclement. Once again, we turn to Ukrainian cartographers, who have made some very interesting adjustments. According to pro-Ukrainian mapping sources, part of the Russian forces separated from the main assault group, moving toward Novoekonomichin, and headed northward toward the settlement of Chasiv Yar. So in this direction, the movement of Russian units is observed. According to the latest map adjustments, it appears that the Russian army is planning to bypass the settlement of Novopoltavka in order to strike it from the northwest and west, essentially to force Ukrainian units to retreat from this section of the front. It seems likely that we're about to see another flower bloom here. It's hard to say what to call it, the Mirolyubivka flower, or perhaps the Vozdvizhenka flower. Next, we move along the H-32 highway. Today, Russian units have also improved their positions. Take note, there is a large number of strongholds in this area. Cartographers specifically report that Russian units managed to improve their positions in this pocket. Part of the stronghold, including a large mega-fortified position, has come under Russian control, though without geolocation confirmation. However, another stronghold just to the north, in the northern area of Malynivka, has reportedly been taken by Russian troops. We're talking about 4 strongholds. There's also video confirmation from Ukrainian sources, specifically from the 36th Brigade. In that footage, we can see Russian soldiers, saboteurs, and assault troops moving through fields and tree lines toward the area north of Malynivka. Ukrainian drones were seen striking Russian assault groups in this footage. Based on this, a small section of the map has been adjusted. That particular section has now been marked accordingly. Again, regarding the H-32 highway, it's currently hard to predict the prospects for Russian troops moving further along it. The reason is that immediately to the north of this recently captured stronghold, a large network of anti-tank ditches begins. These ditches are further reinforced with dragon's teeth and another layer of strongpoints. So, while an advance along the H-32 is theoretically possible, it won't be as fast as perhaps expected or hoped. Also, we can see that a large number of fortified positions have been dug north of Yablunivka, which the Russian army will now have to gradually deal with. Now, moving on to the southern Klebanbek direction, it's noticeable that since 2014, Ukrainian forces didn't manage to dig many defensive lines in this particular area. Precisely in the area where the Russian army is advancing, we see the fewest fortifications. To remind you, when considering the pocket overall, the highest pace of Russian advance is observed on the western flank. And today the map has been updated again, this time in the southwestern part near Zarya and Stara Mykolaiivka. Several tree lines have come under Russian control. We can now see that Russian units have approached the main fortified area around Stara Mykolaiivka, Hanativka and Zarya. It's surrounded by barbed wire, but as we can tell, there are no dragon's teeth or anti-tank ditches. Aside from the wire, there's virtually nothing. Perhaps there are some isolated strongpoints within the settlements, but the density and concentration of these strongholds is nothing compared to, say, Valentinivka or Sukhaya Balka, or even Mirolyubivka. In short, there's hardly anything here. The only question remains, why isn't the Russian army continuing its offensive here at a high pace? Most likely, a regrouping and preparation phase is underway before a potential massed assault. Fighting continues in the Toretsk area. Today, the map was updated in Nelipivka in favor of the Ukrainian armed forces. A few days ago, Ukrainian sources published footage of assault operations conducted by the 100th Mechanized Brigade. At that time, Ukrainian forces reportedly reached nearly the central part of the settlement. However, according to footage from objective control sources, those who made it into the town center didn't manage to get back out. Still, some cartographers, including neutral ones, have marked the map to show Ukrainian presence even in the mine area. For now, we are not updating the mine on the map and are keeping it under Russian control, because just last night, Ukrainian sources published video evidence of FPV drone strikes on Russian equipment in and around the mine. So the situation in that area remains unclear. There's a chance Russian troops were forced to retreat, but it's also possible that no such withdrawal took place, and that much of the information being spread is unverified or speculative. Now we move toward Chasiv Yar. There are some adjustments here as well. Today, Russian units have nearly fully cleared out the central part of the town. Ukrainian sources from the 24th Mechanized Brigade released footage showing assault operations with Russian troops advancing deeper into Chasiv Yar. In these clips, we can see strikes being carried out on the forward Russian positions inside the city. This particular building was targeted in the strikes. Based on this footage, we made a slight map adjustment in the central area, specifically within the citadel of the town of Chasiv Yar. It's still difficult to say whether the Russian army has fully cleared the citadel. It's possible that Ukrainian forces still maintain a presence in certain buildings or structures. However, overall, this is a significant advancement, and it appears that a breakthrough is unfolding in the Chasiv Yar area. Ukrainian forces have now almost completely abandoned the fortified parts of the town and are gradually retreating toward the western and southwestern outskirts. On the Siversk front, there are no significant changes. Russian forces have released objective control footage of strikes on Ukrainian positions both near Serebryanka and Hryhorivka, but there have been no map updates. As for the Lyman section of the front, fighting continues. Some sources report further Russian advances into the settlement of Toretsk. Russian sources claim that at least 80% of Toretsk is under the control of Russian forces, although no geolocation evidence has been provided yet. Meanwhile, the settlement of Zarychny is regularly subjected to air-dropped bombs and artillery strikes. This is the area from which Ukrainian drones are launched and reinforcements are brought in. It seems likely that once the battle for Toretsk is concluded, the Russian army will shift its focus to Zarychny. Speaking more broadly about the Lyman direction, we can see that there are virtually no defensive lines remaining here. Since 2022, the Ukrainian side hasn't managed to dig many fortifications, and most of what they did manage to build is now under Russian control. We're referring to the network of strongpoints in the Kolodyazy-Rydkodyb triangle. Most of them are already held by Russian units. The Russian army has effectively reached open operational space. The only question is why it's not continuing its advance. It may be undergoing a regrouping phase. It's also possible that the Russian side is preparing for another round of negotiations with either the Americans or the Ukrainians, at which point it might launch a new series of powerful strikes to prompt further changes on the map. As for the northern sectors, almost no new information is coming in today. Yes, fighting continues, Iskander strikes are being reported, and there are small adjustments on the maps according to various sources. Today, some pro-Russian sources noted Russian advances near the settlement of Vodolahy. However, there's no objective control footage yet. Perhaps confirmation will come tomorrow or in the next few days. And that's all for now, dear friends. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and all the best to you.